This episode is brought to you by the Girl Scouts of Colorado. Because studies show that being a Girl Scout improves girls' confidence and helps them weather life's challenges. Everything a Girl Scout does revolves around finding their people, discovering their joy, and knowing their power. From planting trees to stocking a food pantry, Girl Scouts learn they have the power to make a difference. I think the only time I went to the sand dunes was with my Girl Scout troop. Man, they taught me how to enjoy camping sometimes. Be a part of something big. Be a Girl Scout. Troops are forming right now in your neighborhood. Go to girlscoutsofcolorado.org/join to start her adventure. Thanks, Troop 664.
Today on CityCast Denver, it's football season again, but this year, what happens on the field is going to have a possibly lucrative and potentially disastrous effect on Boulder and the University of Colorado. We're talking about the CU Buffs' new football coach, who's far from just a coach, Deion Coach Prime Sanders, plus wins and fails of the week. Today is Friday, August 25th. I'm Paul Karolyi, and here's what Denver's talking about. Welcome back to CityCast Denver, the city with more dogs than kids. Literally, that is a fact about the city that we live in. Can you believe that? Someone told me that recently. I checked the numbers. It's legit, according to splootveterinarycare.com and Denverite. It's Friday. We're here at 5280 Magazine. Bree is not here. She's taken some well-deserved time off. She'll be back next week. So I'll just introduce my two excellent guests right off the bat here. The editorial director and editor of 5280 Magazine, respectively, Geoff Van Dyke and Lindsey King. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Paul.
Or should I say welcome back, Lindsey?
Yeah, that's right. I'm a repeat visitor now.
Yeah. Happy to have you back.
I didn't have to travel far. Neither of us did.
Thank you two so much for the use of the space. Can we talk about dogs for a second? I really want to talk about that fact. Did you two know that we have more dogs than kids in this city?
I saw it. And I actually looked at the numbers too. I was like, this can't be right. And then I was like, actually, maybe it can be right.
Actually, it tracks for me.
Yeah? Does that make sense? Why does that make sense to you?
I mean, have you been to a park in Denver?
True.
Have you been on a trail?
Also, I don't have any kids and I have had dogs, so.
Yeah. Huh. I have 2 kids, no dogs.
Oh, interesting. All right, well, we got a great topic here today to get into, and I think we should just dive in because it's so fascinating. There's so much to talk about. For me, longtime listeners know I only decided last year that I'm now a big football fan. The Broncos disappointed me. Fortunately, they're not the big show this season. All eyes here in Colorado, at least, are instead on the new, highly anticipated and highly paid coach of the University of Colorado Buffs, Deion Primetime Sanders, a.k.a. Coach Prime. So Robert Sanchez wrote the big story for 5280 Magazine. We're going to talk about it. But first, can one of you two explain why Deion Sanders coaching the Buffs is a big deal?
I mean, I think the question is, why is it not a big deal? I remember when there started to be some rumors of him interviewing for this job, and Lindsey and I were talking, and we're both college football fans, she much more so than me. And she was like, are you kidding me? Like, why would Deion come to see you? He's a Florida guy. He's coached and lived in Texas, played for the Dallas Cowboys. It just seemed like a weird regional fit.
Yeah.
But the more you start to think about it, it kind of makes sense because he has nowhere to go but up.
Huh. Okay. Well, Lindsey, help me understand why Deion Sanders is special, because I had not heard that name before.
Well, I grew up in Atlanta, so I am very familiar with Prime, or as we called him back in the day, Neon Deion, when he played for the Braves. Neon Deion. And he played for the Falcons. And actually he lived near me. And so he was a bright, shining star his entire career. And even as a kid, apparently from the research that we did, he was a social media star before there was social media. And I think that
Wait, how? Did he have tapes? Do you have VHS tapes go viral or something?
I just mean he was everywhere. He was everywhere on every channel. He was just that guy around town.
Yeah, he was the self-promoter. I mean, he was one of those, early generations of athletes that was preternaturally talented, but also just loved the spotlight. I mean, the gold chains and the sunglasses, and you couldn't see it on YouTube or post it on Twitter, but I mean, you could see it on SportsCenter. You could see it on ESPN and the networks.
And I think CU was very smart in being a program that needed to be shocked back to life. He has brought that burst of energy.
Okay. So let's talk about how it happened, because you're explaining CU was down in the dumps. They went 1-11 last year. It's a terrible football program. It's been terrible for like 20 years. He's this bright shining star who's on the rise. How did they do this? Other than money, I mean, they paid him like $30 million for 4 years, but like still, how did they attract him to Boulder, Colorado?
Yeah, I think if you look at the program over the past 25 years, CU has really struggled to get the right type of coach to bring some swag to CU. And I think that is what they were looking for.
I move different than a normal coach. I think different than a normal coach. Our swag is different. So our staff, we wear sweatpants, and I don't require them to wear collared shirts. We want to feel good. We want to feel like we had practiced coaching the game, and we want a little flair.
And honestly, big college football, it is one of those things that people believe attracts all kinds of things, all kinds of good things, they think, to their university students. So if you're talking about dropping enrollment, you're talking about, all of the marketing that goes on because of college football. I think CU was looking for that.
So Deion had spent a couple of seasons at Jackson State, which is an HBCU, historically black college. And that was his first college coaching experience. He had started a school in the Dallas area called Prime Prep.
Oh, that was a crazy story.
Insane story, right?
Robert's piece.
Yeah. And flamed out spectacularly. But that was the extent of his coaching experience. Jackson State hires him. They start to have success. And he brought attention to that school, a school that was traditionally not known as a football powerhouse.
I think what I'm most interested in this conversation, and I know, Lindsey, you'll be able to relate to this because you also grew up in a college football crazy West Virginia. I'm from Ohio, Columbus, the home of the Ohio State University. Great football program, huge business, and it has a way of warping reality around it. So I'm most interested in how this is going to affect the university, CU, which is this giant state system across our whole state, very important, and Boulder. What do you think about that warping effect in those two big subjects?
Yeah, I think that we've already started to see the warping if you talk about the way that CU for a very long time said that they would never lower any type of their standards. And I think that has already started to happen. They've changed their transfer rules to allow different students with different academic backgrounds to get into the football program. So you've already started to see some of that warping when you're talking about academic standards. I don't know if you're talking about also the university looking, presenting itself in a certain way. Deion came in and got rid of a whole bunch of scholarship players who came to CU because they wanted to be in Boulder. And he gave them their walking papers, and they had to go find other places to be. And I think that that's already kind of showing that the football program takes precedence over people that wanted to be at CU, students that wanted to be there for probably a lot of reasons.
Well, yeah. I mean, the student/athlete part of that equation is, where does the student part fit in?
Yeah, where is it?
I just read yesterday that they have 68 new scholarship players. So, I mean, how it will be interesting, I mean, from a pure football perspective, to see how can they build that culture? How can these players who don't know each other, right, in a short amount of time, be able to gel in a way that potentially leads to winning on the field? I think, Paul, I'm also, if I can just follow up on the question you asked Lindsey, I think that you have already seen how he has warped things, in the sense that you had a spring scrimmage that in the past no one cared about, and it was sold out, and it was broadcast on ESPN. You have seen Fanatics, the sportswear retailer, online retailer, they have said that CU branded gear sales are through the roof. And so I think in some ways you can say CU has already won without even having a game because of the publicity and the shine that Deion has brought to a program that had lost all its shine.
We had a friend the other day say that, Sanders being there means that the games are now more interesting. If they win, it's interesting, but it's also interesting if they lose. So he's right. Geoff's right. They're winning either way because they're getting eyeballs because he is attracting them.
Big star. Best show on TV.
There you go.
Yeah, can't not watch. I mean, he's a fascinating guy. Let me just read a quote from this piece, Robert's piece that we're talking about. There's so many good ones in here. I guess the student athletes is something we should talk more about. So here's a quote about what Deion has instituted, in terms of policies for his athletes. The quote is, he forbade cell phones in team meetings, but allowed players to put their Instagram handles on the backs of their practice jerseys. Snoop Dogg and Rick Ross hung around the sidelines. The Rock visited practice. Sanders talked about players getting paid, about the work it would take for these men to get to the NFL.
We don't have a budget to advertise or market or even to recruit like the big boys. So we have to use social media. So I start putting all the ats on the coach's back of the shirt. So a running back does well, that running back watching TV is going to at that coach and getting them DMs and try to get. So that's the way we recruit. So everything is strategic and it has a purpose. Also, our kids, when they warm up pregame, they have their ats on the back of their shirts. So, people add them up, making sure they know them and follow them. All these kids want followers, and we're trying to revolutionize the game and get them followers as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think Deion, this goes back to what Lynn said a few minutes ago, which is he was a social media star before there was social media. I mean, he understands the business of publicity in ways that very few people do. I mean, Donald Trump being one of the other ones, and for better or for worse, and that's a conversation for another day. But I think he understands these young men. He understands what they want. He understands that this is a business. And he said, I saw a quote, it was around the time of conference realignment, and there was all this craziness going on. CU left the Pac-12. They went back to the Big 12, where they had been, 13 years ago or whatever. And people were up in arms, and it started this domino effect. And he said, why is everyone getting mad? People are going after the money. You get mad when kids do the NIL stuff, but it's all about money. And, whether we like it or not, he's kind of right.
He's absolutely right. The NIL stuff is what he understands. He understands how to get paid. And
what is NIL?
So it's name, image, likeness, which is a recent change in the way.
This is the change that allows NCAA players to get paid by smaller sponsorships?
Correct.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah.
Or some not so small
or some
ones.
not so small ones if you can get those.
Yeah, I mean, Bryce Young was doing ads with all the Heisman folks. I forget what it was. It was...
Yeah, they're big. You can get, some of these kids would rather stay in school at this point because they can get paid. They don't have to immediately go into, pro leagues, or some of them don't even end up in the pros, but they're getting paid as college kids. And Sanders understands, and he's right in that it is only fair that they are getting paid for the product they are putting on the field.
Well, and Paul, to that quote you read, I think Robert gets to this in the piece, but it's like Deion knows everyone. He knows everyone in football, but he kind of knows everyone. I mean, if you have The Rock and Rick Ross showing up at practice, how can that not be appealing to these young men, these athletes who are like, hey, what would one meeting with The Rock, how could that change your life down the road, perhaps?
Yeah, I mean, the power is so obvious. I love the way he's like, there's this moment happening with a bunch of, across sports, really. It's LeBron James's thing too. It's player empowerment, but it's so fascinating the way it's changing the balance of power. And he's one of these people that really seems like he's in the driver's seat of that change. Do you guys get that sense too, that he's an agent of that?
Absolutely, 100%. In terms of college football, he is a new generation of coach who, is sort of all in on this stuff. And I think he's changing the game. I think the cat is out of the bag, and we will see more Deons or Deion pretenders. There is really only one Deion Sanders.
The thing I think that's worth bringing up is that, when you're talking about this new guard, the thing is, though, CU has made a decision that they want to be part of big time college football. And I think one of the things that kind of goes back to what you were saying about CU and big time college football is actually not a money winner for almost every program in the country. If you're at Alabama, if you're at Georgia, you might be bringing in dollars. But for the most part, as a West Virginia University fan, I know it is not a money generator. It is probably not good for your school overall. And it will be interesting to see if CU is right that the marketing opportunity is what they were looking for, because I think there's some big downsides there too.
What do you mean? Like what?
Right now, the athletic program is almost entirely separate from the university. Deion has his own marketing. He has his own people that run his PR. He doesn't have to answer to anybody at the university, at least seemingly so.
Yeah, I mean, he has his own reality show. He's bigger. He's bigger than the CU athletic department. He is the show.
I mean, he's posting stuff when he has some pretty serious health issues in terms of blood clotting, and he walks with a limp now, but he had to go in for a surgery. This was it was right before we went to press. So it was a month, 6 weeks ago. And he was posting pictures, or his fiance was posting pictures of him in the hospital, in the hospital bed before he gets wheeled in for surgery. Like, everything is for content. It's all there, whether it's the good, the bad, the ugly.
Robert's story keeps driving home how big of a risk this was for CU, how it could go really well, for obvious reasons. The football program could explode, but it could go bad. And there are a few good reasons why that might be. Which of those reasons do you two think are the most serious or compelling?
I think the biggest is the challenge to the academic reputation of the university. I mean, I think Lindsey and I may have very different ideas about this. And actually, Paul, I'd be curious to know what you think about it. But, one of the things that was really interesting to me in Robert's story was he talked to a number of professors at the school. These were not necessarily just rank and file professors, not that that's saying anything about rank and file professors. These were, faculty chairs, people who were involved in the hiring, people who have been involved in academic governance. And pretty unanimously, they're concerned about what this means. So Lynn's alluded to the fact that they changed the transfer rules. They made it easier for students to transfer in, which is a lowering of standards. What does that mean for a school that is the flagship branch of a large state university? I think the jury's out on that,
I think it depends what happens on the field. I think if he wins, Lindsey, yeah, you know this from experience, West Virginia, and you're going to school in Georgia. Tell me.
Well, I think it depends on him winning. But here's the thing: I think CU, and everybody has said, I'm not the only one, but he can't win too much, because then CU is going to be in the same position it was in a year ago, because he, mark my words, will be at Florida State. He will be at an SEC school. So the thing is how long does CU get to enjoy Deion's, the glow of Deion in Boulder? If he's too good, he's gone.
Yeah.
So you've lowered your standards. You've changed the way that you allow someone to operate at your university. And then where's your dignity after he leaves?
Or a third option, which is what I saw at Ohio State, which was chronic winning, which creates a sort of like the slippery slope of changing standards. Like the transfer portal is one thing, but there was the rumors that Robert reported on that Sanders had pushed for CU to lower their GPA eligibility requirement to the NCAA minimum. That's the kind of thing that could happen after a few years of winning. Right.
Where does the slippery slope end?
Yeah. Interesting. Really, really interesting questions for CU, for Boulder, for Deion, if he would email back the show. Last question for you two. Broncos looks like they're doing pretty bad. Again, looks like they're going to be really bad. Although they have a new coach, I'm not going to get excited about who's going to have a better record this year. The Broncos, the Buffs. Got to have a prediction.
Oh man,
put it on the record.
I'm going Broncos for sure.
Me too.
The Broncos. I know, and I'm not a Broncos stan. I'm. Here's the thing: their record was worse than it should have been. They were terribly they had injuries all over the place. They obviously had coaching issues. I think they're an even, they're 8-8-ish team, 500-ish team. I don't think CU is going to win more than 3 games.
I agree. You've got all these new kids up there at CU. They don't know how to play together yet. The transfer portal is great until you've got a whole bunch of kids that have never even been on the field together. So yeah, I'm going maybe 4 or 5 games in Boulder.
Interesting. Well, we'll check in at the end of the season and hold you two accountable. We'll be back in just a second with wins and fails. All right, and we're back. We're going to do our favorite way to end the week here, the segment that I like to call still wins and fails. Although there has been some good feedback recently about what we call this segment. Bree's not here to defend herself, so I'm not going to get into that. We'll talk about it next week. So fails first, because we got to end on wins. Geoff, Lindsey, does either one of you want to start with a fail?
I have a fail.
Bring it on, Geoff.
So DPS started this week.
Mm-hmm.
I have 2 sons in DPS.
Yeah.
And as everyone listening knows, it's been extremely hot in Denver.
Oh boy, yeah.
And my fail is that DPS still has a huge number of schools that don't have air conditioning. And it's 2023, folks. This is not okay.
Yeah, it's too hot.
So one of my sons is at a school with AC. The other one is not. And he comes home and he is worked. And the story I read was a 7 News story, and they were talking about West High School, which got AC during the summer. But their principal was saying that the classrooms would get up to the mid-90s. I mean,
Yeesh.
It's hard enough for an adolescent to learn in the best of circumstances, but this is just a huge fail on DPS. And, there was a bond passed in 2020 that was close to $800 million, I believe. $795 million bond. And some of that is going toward these HVAC systems in some of these schools. But there's still 31 schools in DPS that either don't have AC or need significant upgrades to their AC. So I think let's figure this out, folks. It's just not a good deal.
Yeah, sounds like it's not working. I did see that they installed AC at 11 schools over this past summer, so they're moving in the right direction there. But yeah, that is quite a fail.
Yep.
Lindsey, how about you?
So the story that I looked at was in the Denver Post, but it is about the Douglas County Library Board trying to ban LGBTQ plus related books, which just, I know this is a trend across the country. I know it's happening everywhere, but it's so hard when you look at it in, your backyard and you think that something like how a book about drag queens is going to ruin children because it's hypersexualized. It's so disappointing and it's so hard to read. The Denver Post did a good job on it, but it's just ick.
Yeah. What are the books? Does it say which books there are that they're actually banning them now for sure? There
is going to be an actual meeting, and they are going to discuss this. I think there is a person that's in charge of maybe rejecting this plea, but
so still not quite okay. I knew they were talking about it down in Douglas County, but
there's the Douglas County Library's Board of Trustees is being asked by a conservative men's group to ban 4 books. The only one that I think that they name is The Hips on the Drag Queen Go Swish Swish Swish, which sounds kind of fun to me.
Yeah, that seems fine. But okay, Douglas County going to ban some books. Great, good for them. Hopefully not. My turn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's
Okay.
hear it.
I got two. I got one small one, which is that Ed Sheeran got into Casa Bonita and not me.
Oh,
I guess
I
you have to
saw
sell
that.
out Empower Field or something.
And then had dinner at Casa Bonita.
Well, you talked to Matt and Trey.
I did.
Tell me, what do you think about Ed Sheeran getting in there? Because that really rankled me when I saw that.
It does seem questionable. I think.
Yeah.
Did he get the email? Maybe he
I
got
still
an
haven't
email.
gotten the email.
Lindsey.
I
That's
still haven't
very
gotten the email.
Generous of you.
I got the email.
What'd you have to take?
What?
Did you go? I mean, what
I
did you
went.
think? Yeah, how'd you feel?
I had never been before.
Oh, okay.
So it's really weird because I had never
weird.
been. It was fun. Saw a puppet show, walked around in the caves.
I'm so sad Bree's not here.
I know she would be on fire on
We
this.
need to talk about
Music
this
and
with
Casa
Bree.
Bonita. I mean, we'll talk about it next week. But the thing about Ed Sheeran that got to me, and I would like to hear what you think about how Matt and Trey view this, is Casa Bonita always had this sense it was for the people. It was cheap enough that you could take a family there and you could go and enjoy yourself, and it was accessible. And now we're at this point where they're not actually opening it up, but they are letting celebrities in for these weird private parties.
It's not a great look. I have plenty of thoughts about this ongoing opening, this soft opening, whatever you call it. I think that what the team there did was they did themselves and everyone a disservice by saying it was going to open at a certain time, right? Does anyone in this room know of a restaurant that opened on time? No.
It's never happened.
I think literally it's never happened in the history of the world.
I think the Quick Trip down the road for me is on target. They're building it right now. But yeah, the convenience store might manage
One can
it.
hope.
There you go. But, I talked to Dana as well, and she was like, I've never opened a restaurant on time. And those are restaurants that are not serving 700 people simultaneously. So you have this sort of perfect storm of passionate fans. People love the story of Casa Bonita. People love the idea of Matt and Trey buying it. It's so perfect. And then they ran into the realities of running a restaurant that is massive. And I think they could have done themselves and everyone else a service by being a little more realistic and clear about what was going on behind the scenes and saying, look, we're doing our best. We still don't have things dialed in, and it's okay. We will get there. But when you have people like me who, knows the publicist really well, and I still haven't gotten the email, and then you have Ed Sheeran, not a great look.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's just bitter because he didn't get the email and I did.
I am bitter.
It's not
I think
same
that's
with me.
fair.
Yeah, I feel the exact same way, and that's the correct way to feel. Freaking bitter and want to get in there. Dang it. All right, let's move on to wins.
All right, I've got one.
Go for it, Geoff.
All right, I read this story on CPR. It was one of these stories when you look at the news these days, it's not always uplifting, but this story warmed my heart. So there is a nonprofit here in Denver called emergencyrv.org. It was founded by a Denver guy whose name is Woody Faircloth, which sounds like something out of a Dickens novel, right?
Woody Faircloth. I love
But
that.
he
That's
started
so good.
he started this nonprofit, and quite simply what it does is gets donated RVs that they then give to first responders who have lost their homes in natural disasters. Started after the Camp Fire in Northern California in 2018. Woody and his 11-year-old daughter locked down 5 RVs that they are shipping from San Diego to Maui. And not only that, they have these women in Iowa. Don't ask me why Iowa. I'm not sure. I don't know all the connective tissues, but these women quilt blankets. They put a brand new handmade blanket in each RV that they give to these firefighters who have lost their homes. And the idea being you lose so much that has meaning to you, right? So you get this RV donated to you, which is pretty spectacular in and of itself. And then it has a handmade quilt in it. So I just thought this was awesome story. Kudos to Woody Faircloth and his 11-year-old daughter and emergencyrv.org.
Great. Yeah, we'll put the link to that in the show notes. That's what a wonderful idea. The quilts especially is a nice touch.
It's just such a nice touch.
My I have a deep abiding respect for the quilting tradition. My mom has been a quilter for a long time. My house is full of beautiful quilts, so the people who receive those, I know they will appreciate it. Lindsey, do you want to go?
Yeah, I can go. All right. So this was in Denver, right? As we all know, the housing crisis here in Denver is tough. The market is ridiculous. Nobody can find, reasonable places to live. But one of the things that people have been looking into, and there was a study done, and this, this story in Denver, right, talks about commercial buildings here. We all know that there are a whole bunch of commercial buildings that are not being used because we're all working from home. And instead, they are looking at whether they can be adaptively reused, meaning someone goes in, looks at these buildings, decides if they are built in a way that can take apartments. And apparently, Denver has a huge amount of buildings that have the opportunity for this. And there was a study saying that immediately out of the gate, it seems like there's about 16, there could be upwards of 50, but 16 that really look like this could happen. And there's studies and ongoing, probably like looking at HVAC systems and those kinds of things. But it's bathrooms, those kind of elevators. And actually one of the big things was, is there enough parking? Which, as you know, I circled the block 6 times trying to find a parking spot downtown Denver. But is it potentially a huge win to be able to change these empty commercial buildings into apartments or other types of living units?
Yeah. Yeah, we've been talking about that a lot on the show recently, actually. I think it's just a fascinating idea. I mean, it seems so obvious, right? Like, we need more housing. We have all these empty office buildings because remote workers aren't coming back to the office. Why can't we put the square peg in the hole? I don't know. I was looking at that report this week too. Which of those buildings would you be most, did you look at it? Because it was like the way it broke it down by building and talked about like specific challenges. Some of those buildings, I'm like, I don't know if I would want to live in that. They'd have to do a lot of renovating.
Well, they were saying, like Denver's Republic Plaza, which is one of Colorado's tallest buildings. And they mentioned a couple other by name that I didn't know which ones they were. But I think it's a good point. But here's the thing. If you need an affordable place to live, all of a sudden an unattractive building becomes pretty darn attractive. Obviously, I think when you're talking about the demographics here in Denver, where we have a lot of people who are living on the street, there are probably lots of, these are probably a lot of solutions, but also just to regular folks who have regular jobs who can't afford to live in Denver anymore. And I think that it's interesting to think about how that might be able to be at least one solution. Absolutely. It is really interesting. And listeners, if you do want to hear more about that, I recommend going back in your podcast feed. I don't remember if it was this Monday or last Monday, but Bree and I talked to her old boss, who's this like real estate economist, old guard Denverite who's been around like downtown Denver business and politics for like 30 years. And he knows this issue back to front. He was just fascinating. He knew all the economics. We went really, really deep with him. If you want to learn more. My turn? Yeah. Do you have one? What's up? Oh, yeah, I've got one. My win this week goes to History Colorado. That museum is crushing it. My wife and I went on Saturday. Every single exhibit in there was just like hitting 10 out of 10. Sand Creek Massacre, I cried. Virgil Ortiz, Indigenous Futurism, fascinating. Never would have expected to see anything like that in a history museum. It kind of blew my mind. I want to see that as a full-length movie. But my favorite was John Fielder's favorite place. Have you two seen this? I haven't seen it, but I saw the banner as I was driving down Broadway the other day, and just coming on the heels of his passing, it caught my eye. And so I can't say enough good things. You got to go see it. This is a special thing that he has done with the people at History Colorado. This is like, I didn't really appreciate his work before. It was landscapes. It's like landscapes of Colorado. They kind of run together a little bit. Kind of postcardy. Yeah, but like I knew why people had talked about him, and like as he's this talented guy. So the exhibit is designed around a single backpacking trip he did to find this specific place where he took his favorite photo.
That's the whole idea of the exhibit. So it starts with, here's the camera bag and the exact camera he used for 30 years and took on this backpacking trip. Here's the fleece that he wore that I then found on eBay that night and may or may not have coming soon to my house. The boots that he wore, like you can see his boots. And then he tells this story through photos of this 9-day trek that he and his son's friends went out, and like they had a medical emergency, and then this was where it happened, and you can see it in the beautiful photo of the landscape and the way the pictures all run together and then lead up to this giant wall-sized photo of this beautiful mountain range that has the morning sun, and you know that it's there because he planned to be at those exact coordinates, because he plotted it all out. He knew exactly what the light was going to look like.
The perfect time, the perfect place. Totally intentional. And then the 6 photos that he then explains like why they're not technically perfect. I wanted to take a photography class. I bought the Fleece. I am so excited about this. And I want to put a call out to listeners. The best photography class in the city. I want to know about it. I want to take that class. Please help me out. I want to follow in John Fielder's footsteps. Do you know Lindsey? Lindsey's a photographer.
I'm a wannabe photographer, but I actually don't know. I mean, you could look at the Art Students League of Denver. I don't know if they do photography, but there's probably lots of really great places to get some photography classes. But we wrote a profile of John Fielder years ago, and the amount of time and effort, and like you said, going to the exact spot at the exact time was a lot about, this profile went into that. And he was a real fascinating guy and talented.
Yeah. I pulled up that piece after I learned of his death. It's called Second Nature. And Paul, especially coming on the heels of seeing that exhibition, you should check it out. But listeners too, it was a while ago, maybe 13, 14 years ago, but a real poignant piece. His life was touched by tragedy and very poignant.
Yeah, I mean, I just can't emphasize enough, like the difference between a photo that I would take on my phone of a mountain versus what he would do. Like now that I know all the work that took it from a 7 out of 10 to a 10 out of 10, I just appreciate it so much more now. Anyway, so listeners, call in. Let me know what's the best photography class in Denver. The photography hotline is 720-500-5418. Again, that number is 720-500-5418. Send us a text. Leave us a voicemail. Please help me out. Geoff, Lindsey, we're here at the end of the show. Do you have anything to plug? Anything you want listeners to know about or see or hear, or maybe a hot recommendation?
Gosh, I would say read the Deion story. Read Robert's Deion story, which you can find online.
Absolutely. Co-sign. That's going to be in the show notes for sure.
We also have in the August issue, totally different, sort of, this is what we do at 5280, which is, Strange Bedfellows in the same issue. But the cover story was written by one of our former staffers named Jay Bouchard. It's a beginner's guide to sailing in Colorado. And the conceit is, what was it? 10 mistakes?
All the mistakes that he made when he was learning to sail. And Jay's a funny guy in the first place, but his misadventures in learning how to sail in Colorado is kind of the conceit of the story. And it's a fun read. And interesting and helpful, I think, if you ever thought you maybe wanted to get out on, Dylan and see how you can.
Well, and even if you did, I didn't really know there was this robust sailing scene on the lakes, the high alpine lakes of Colorado. And just that, learning that, and it's not all, regattas and rich people. It's people who live on their boats and people who have, like Jay, a boat that he bought for $140, fixed up, and now sails on Cherry Creek Reservoir. Yeah.
Interesting. That does. I am not aware of this community. The high country sailing world.
It's a thing.
That's crazy. All right, Lindsey, how about you? You got something you want to plug?
Oh man, you should have told me about this. I think that, coming up, I guess maybe in one of our future issues, another thing that maybe is cool and fun is how to get into gravel biking.
Mm-hmm.
And that
hitting gravel.
Yeah. And I'm not that person, but still, I think it was really fun to read. And that's coming to a 5280 issue near you.
Great. Well, we'll have all the links to all the stuff we talked about, plus more in the show notes. Lindsey, King, Geoff Van Dyke, thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you, Paul.
Yeah, thanks.
That's all for today here on CityCast Denver. Our producers this week were me, Paul Karolyi, Lizzie Goldsmith, Natalie Rivera, and Olivia Jewel Love. Natalia Aldana and Peyton Garcia write our morning newsletter, Hey Denver. Bree Davies is our host. Our music is by Los Mocachetes, with additional mixing by Tyler Lindgren. If you haven't already, subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts, follow us on Instagram at CityCast Denver, and tell who else? Deion Sanders about us the next time you see him. You can sign up for that daily newsletter and learn more about us at denver.citycast.fm. See you next week. Deion, Coach Prime Sanders.